Tom Riley knew his world was shrinking. He was 71, and the small strokes he'd had a few years back had left their mark. Hands that weren't quite steady, vision that sometimes blurred at the edges. The doctor had been kind but firm, and the DMV agreed, no more driving. For Tom, a Marine who'd carried the weight of discipline and self-reliance since Vietnam, handing over his car keys felt like surrendering a piece of his soul. But Tom was a survivor. He adapted. His small pension kept him in his modest apartment on the south side of Oakwood, a town where the scent of the downtown bakery often mingled with the smell of freshly cut grass, and the distant whistle of the freight train marked the hours. His lifeline became an old, dependable Schwinn bicycle. It wasn't just transport to Johnson's grocery 3 times a week. It was his connection to the town, his quiet refusal to be penned in. That Tuesday, in late May, felt like a good day. The sun was warm. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the big oak trees lining Maple Street, and Tom's joints weren't aching too badly as he pedaled homeward. He'd carefully packed his groceries in the front basket and the saddlebags, cans low, bread on top. He was humming an old tune halfway across town near the old lumber yard when he heard it, a sharp, metallic crack from beneath him. Tom knew that sound instantly. Trouble. He squeezed the handbrakes gently, hoping to ease to a stop, but it was too late. The chain snapped, binding the rear wheels solid. The bike lurched violently. Tom wrestled with the handlebars, managing somehow to stay upright as his momentum carried him a few more feet, coming to an awkward halt directly in front of the Road Vultures Motorcycle Club. The Road Vultures clubhouse was a low, windowless cinder-block building, painted flat black, set back slightly from the road. Even from the curb, you could feel the low thrum of loud music and taste the faint smell of exhaust and stale beer. Its reputation was known throughout the county: hard riders, short tempers, and little patience for anyone outside their circle. Today, a dozen gleaming motorcycles were parked haphazardly out front, their chrome blinding in the afternoon sun. Their owners, men and women in worn leather cuts bearing the club's vulture patch, lounged at rough wooden picnic tables on the cracked asphalt patio. Tattoos snaked up bare arms. Faces were weathered and watchful. Every head turned as Tom, struggling to manage his suddenly useless bicycle, found himself stranded on their doorstep. Tom assessed the situation with the ingrained calm of old training. Not friendly territory. He ignored the stares, the sudden silence that felt heavy with judgment, and bent down to examine the broken chain dangling like a dead snake. A low chuckle drifted from the patio. "Hey, Pops, lose your way to the bingo hall?" one voice sneered, triggering a ripple of harsh laughter. A thick-bearded man wearing a faded bandana raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. "Bet that thing's got fewer miles left on it than he does." More laughter, louder this time. Tom said nothing. He'd stared down worse than loudmouths in leather. He dug in his pocket for the small multi-tool he always carried. His hands shook, the old tremor amplified by the unwelcome spotlight. He tried to coax the broken ends of the chain together, knowing it was pointless. No one moved from the patio tables. They just watched, their beers paused halfway to their lips, finding amusement in his struggle. Tom kept his eyes fixed on the greasy chain links, his face shaded by the brim of his faded olive-drab USMC veteran cap, revealing nothing. That cap was part of him, like the dog tags resting coolly against his skin beneath his shirt. They were anchors to who he was, no matter what others saw. The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly. On the patio, the amusement began to sharpen into something crueler. A couple of the younger bikers pulled out their phones, smirks spreading across their faces as they hit record. "Gonna get some good hits off this," one muttered, framing his shot. Old-timer versus gravity. Tom's fingers slipped on the greasy metal. The multi-tool skittered across the pavement. As he instinctively reached for it, the bicycle, already unstable, tilted slowly, then crashed onto its side with a clang. His carefully packed groceries spilled out. Cans of soup and corn rolled across the asphalt, apples scattered like dropped marbles, a few bumping gently against the dusty black boots of the nearest bikers. A fresh wave of laughter erupted, louder and meaner than before. Tom straightened up slowly, his back twinging in protest, and began the painstaking process of gathering his scattered groceries. He moved methodically, retrieving one dented can, one bruised apple at a time, acutely aware of the phone lenses tracking his every movement. He wouldn't give them the reaction they craved. Maybe someone ought to help him, a woman's voice offered tentatively from the back, but she was quickly shushed by a gruff male voice. Why? Free show's the best kind. Tom had just retrieved the last rolling apple when the atmosphere on the patio suddenly shifted. The laughter died abruptly. The thumping music from inside seemed to recede. A heavy, expectant silence fell, the kind Tom recognized from tense patrols decades ago. He looked up. The crowd of bikers was subtly parting, making way for a figure emerging from the dim doorway of the clubhouse. He was huge, built like a draft horse, easily 6'4", his massive shoulders straining the seams of his leather cut. President was stitched in stark white thread beneath the circling vulture insignia. Tattoos covered his arms from wrist to shoulder, intricate patterns mixed with faded symbols Tom recognized as military ink. His beard was a formidable graying thicket, matching the gray streaks at his temples. Sharp, assessing eyes under a heavy brow took in the scene in one sweeping glance, the scattered groceries, the fallen bicycle, the old man in the veteran cap, and his own club members, some still smirking, phones held loosely. This was Dave Grizzly Peterson, founder and iron-fisted president of the Road Vultures. Grizzly surveyed the situation for a long, silent moment, his expression unreadable stone. Then he stepped off the patio onto the pavement. The silence was now absolute, thick enough to cut. He walked directly toward Tom, his heavy boots crunching softly on the loose gravel scattered over the asphalt. Tom straightened his shoulders as much as his stiff back allowed, meeting the big man's gaze with quiet dignity. He didn't speak, just waited. Grizzly stopped a few feet away. He looked from Tom to the watching crowd on the patio, his gaze lingering for a moment on the bikers holding phones. His disapproval was palpable, unspoken, but clear. Several bikers shifted uncomfortably, lowering their devices. Then Grizzly bent down, grabbed the frame of Tom's Schwinn, and lifted it upright as if it were a child's toy. He squinted at the broken chain, let out a low grunt, then turned and began wheeling the bicycle toward the clubhouse door. "You coming?" he asked Tom over his shoulder. His voice was a deep rumble, gruff, but devoid of malice. Tom hesitated only briefly. He gathered his grocery bags, the plastic handles digging into his trembling fingers, and followed Grizzly toward the dark entrance. At the door, Grizzly turned back to the stunned onlookers. "Anybody got tools and a shred of common sense? Get your butts in here, now." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Bikers exchanged uncertain glances, caught between their recent mockery and their president's undeniable authority. Then, slowly, movement began. An older biker near the back pushed himself up. Then 2 younger guys near the door stood, then several more. Within 30 seconds, almost every road vulture on the patio was on their feet, heading inside. "Got my kit in the saddlebag," one called out. Pretty sure I got a spare chain might fit, offered another. My uncle had one just like this, a young woman added, tying back her long hair. I can tune those brakes. Most stood immediately, grabbing toolkits or heading toward their bikes. But the young biker who'd been filming, the one who'd joked about old-timer versus gravity, froze for a long moment. His face flushed a deep red. He looked from Tom's retreating back to his phone, then back again, his jaw tight. Finally, with a sharp exhale, he shoved the phone deep into his jeans pocket and grabbed a large wrench from a nearby toolbox, his expression a mixture of shame and resolve as he hurried after the others. What had been a scene of public humiliation moments before was dissolving into something unexpected. Tom clutched his groceries and followed Grizzly into the dim, beer-scented interior of the Road Vultures clubhouse. The bikers filed in behind them, their earlier swagger replaced by a focused, almost awkward energy. Inside, the usual noise was replaced by a tense quiet. Grizzly pointed to a heavy-duty pool table under a hanging bar light. With a single sweep of his massive forearm, he cleared the billiard balls into the pockets. He carefully lifted Tom's bicycle onto the green felt surface. "All right," Grizzly said, his voice echoing slightly in the sudden hush. "Let's see what we got." The other bikers crowded around, toolkits snapping open, wrenches and pliers appearing. An impromptu repair station materialized under the yellow light. Tom stood just outside the circle, watching with quiet disbelief as these rough-looking men and women, who minutes ago had been laughing at his misfortune, now bent over his old Schwinn with intense concentration. "Chain's toast," someone confirmed, holding up the snapped links. "Wore right through. Brake cables look ready to pop too," added another, gently testing the levers. "Lucky they didn't." "Bearings feel rough," muttered a third biker, slowly spinning the front wheel. "Need grease," Grizzly nodded, taking it all in. Then he turned his gaze from the bicycle to Tom. The big man stepped closer. Tom instinctively stiffened, but Grizzly moved with surprising care. He reached toward Tom's collar. Tom flinched slightly before realizing Grizzly wasn't threatening him. The biker president gently fished out the thin silver chain tucked beneath Tom's shirt. 2 small, worn metal dog tags lay exposed in his large palm. Grizzly held them carefully, his expression growing serious as he read the stamped letters aloud, his voice low but carrying clearly through the now silent bar. "Thomas Riley, serial number 218409, blood type A positive, religion Protestant." He paused, his eyes lifting to meet Tom's directly. The air grew thick with unspoken weight. 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, Vietnam, 68-69. A collective intake of breath seemed to ripple through the room. The bikers who had been smirking earlier now looked down at their boots, their faces tight with sudden, dawning shame. The silence stretched, heavy and profound. "You were a Marine," Grizzly stated softly. It wasn't a question, it was recognition. Tom nodded once, his throat unexpectedly tight. "Still am," he managed, his voice raspy. "Just got older." From the edge of the circle, a younger biker stepped forward hesitantly. He looked maybe 35, clean-shaven except for a trim goatee. "Riley? Sir? Kilo Company?" Tom peered at him, searching his memory. "Yes." "My dad, Bill Henderson. He served under you. Key San." Tom's stoic mask cracked. A flicker of sharp memory, clear and painful, crossed his face. "Billy Henderson. Good kid. Best radio operator I had, brave as they come." He held the younger man's gaze. "He make it back?" "Yeah," Kevin Henderson said, his voice choked with emotion. "He did. He always told me. The only reason he got out of that ambush alive was 'cause his sergeant, you, sir, dragged him nearly 2 clicks through hell to the medevac chopper after he took shrapnel. A low murmur spread through the assembled bikers. The atmosphere wasn't just respectful now, it felt almost reverent. The weight of their earlier mockery seemed to press down on them. "Your father," Tom said simply, his voice regaining some strength, "was a damn fine Marine. How is he?" Kevin looked down. "Passed, 5 years back. Cancer. Agent Orange took him in the end." Tom nodded slowly, the familiar ache of loss settling in his chest. Too many brothers gone that way. Grizzly Peterson, still holding Tom's dog tags almost reverently, turned back to his club members. His voice regained its command, but the tone was different, protective, firm with purpose. "All right, people, listen up. We ain't just fixing this bike. We're rebuilding it. You hear me? Whatever it needs, it gets. Period." The next hour unfolded like nothing Oakwood had ever seen. The road vultures, known more for roaring engines and bar fights, transformed into a focused, meticulous pit crew. They didn't just replace the chain, they gave the old Schwinn a complete overhaul. Someone produced a power washer and blasted away years of grime, revealing surprising hints of the original blue paint. 2 bikers who owned a local garage meticulously disassembled the wheel hubs, cleaning and repacking the bearings until the wheels spun silently and true. Another group replaced the frayed brake cables, adjusted the pads, and tuned the gears with surprising precision. Then 3 bikers fired up their Harleys and disappeared down the street. They returned 20 minutes later with brand new heavy-duty puncture-resistant tires bought from the bike shop downtown. "These ought to handle the potholes better," explained the young woman, who knew Schwinns, skillfully mounting the new rubber on the old rims. Throughout it all, Tom stood quietly, sipping a glass of water someone had pressed into his hand. He watched them work, this rough-edged crew, their tattooed hands moving with surprising care. He accepted their help with a quiet dignity, recognizing this wasn't pity. It was something deeper, a connection across decades and different kinds of battles, an echo of the brotherhood he'd known long ago. As the rebuilt bicycle began to look almost new, Grizzly slipped into a back office. He returned moments later, holding a folded black leather vest. It was brand new, similar to the ones the club wore, but simpler, without the town or state patches. The work around the pool table paused again. All eyes turned to Grizzly as he approached Tom. "Tom," Grizzly said, his voice softer than Tom would have thought possible. "We can't make you a road vulture. That's a different life." He carefully unfolded the vest. The club's circling vulture logo was sharp and clear on the back, but stitched above it, in clean, bold white letters, was a single word: respect. "But we sure as hell can honor yours," Grizzly finished, his gaze steady. He held the vest open. Tom hesitated only a fraction of a second before turning slightly, allowing Grizzly to place it gently over his shoulders. It settled perfectly, the weight comfortable and solid. "Thank you for your service, Marine," Grizzly said, extending his large, grease-stained hand. Tom took it. His own hand still trembled slightly, but his grip was strong. He didn't cry. Men of his generation didn't easily show emotion like that. But anyone watching closely would have seen the way his weathered fingers lingered on the embroidered letters, the slight squaring of his shoulders, the faint glimmer of moisture in his eyes, before he gave a firm nod. "Bike's ready, Sergeant," Kevin Henderson announced, carefully wheeling the transformed Schwinn off the pool table. It looked reborn, the frame gleamed, the new tires looked rugged and capable, the cables were tight, the grips new. "Added one more thing," Kevin said, pointing to a small, polished brass eagle, globe, and anchor emblem they'd securely mounted on the front fender, right below the handlebars. so people know. Tom looked from the bike to the faces around him, a deep nod conveying the thanks words couldn't capture. He carefully repacked his rescued groceries. As he prepared to leave, Grizzly turned to the assembled club members. "All right, who's riding escort for the sergeant?" Every single hand in the bar went up without hesitation. Minutes later, the afternoon traffic on Oakwood's main street slowed to a crawl as people stared. Tom Riley rode his gleaming, rebuilt bicycle down the road, not alone, but at the head of an unlikely procession. Behind him, maintaining a respectful distance, rumbled nearly 24 powerful motorcycles, their engines a deep, protective growl. The notorious Road Vultures MC had become an honor guard. When they reached Tom's quiet apartment building, the bikers formed two neat lines flanking the walkway, engines idling low like waiting sentinels. Tom wheeled his bicycle between them, nodding to each rider. They nodded back, their faces serious, masks of toughness replaced by open respect. "You need anything, Tom?" Grizzly said before they mounted up, clapping him lightly on the shoulder of the new vest. "Anything at all, you know where we are. And if this bike gives you any trouble, you bring it straight back. Got it?" Tom nodded firmly. "Got it, Dave. Thank you." The next afternoon, pedaling toward Johnson's grocery, Tom noticed something new outside the Road Vultures clubhouse. Two members were carefully installing a small brass plaque beside the main door. On his way home, groceries safely stowed, he saw the finished plaque shining in the sun. The engraved words were simple. "Here, respect is earned and remembered." It was the start of something. The Road Vultures didn't change overnight, but a subtle shift occurred, and a new, unspoken ritual began. The first time it happened, Tom was riding past their clubhouse a few days later. The usual roar and chatter seemed to fade as he approached. He glanced over. The bikers on the patio had stopped talking. Engines that were idling fell silent. Helmets came off. Every Road Vulture present, from the newest prospect to Grizzly himself, stood quietly at attention, watching him pass. They held that posture until he rounded the corner. They never mentioned it. They just did it. Every time Tom Riley rode by, a silent acknowledgement, a bond reforged. Tom continued his rides through Oakwood, maybe sitting a little taller in the saddle, the leather vest a quiet symbol over his simple shirt. He was still just an old Marine on a bicycle, but sometimes honor doesn't need a parade. Sometimes it just needs to be seen, recognized and remembered, even in the most unexpected places. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more like it, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a new upload. See you in the next one.